Hello, my name is Rickard, and in this tutorial, we're going to recreate this ballerina poster in Photoshop. I recently ran across this series of character posters for the new film Ballerina, and I thought it would be a fun exercise to recreate this poster in Photoshop. Now, in the course of this, we're going to explore layer styles, how to set up a smart object poster for easy switching of characters, as well as some variable typography inside of Photoshop. Now, if you want to follow along, I have included all the assets that I use in a link in the description of this video. It does include some great custom brushes. So go ahead, download those, and then let's dive into Photoshop. Okay, so here's the poster. You can see we have our character on the right. We've got our lettering on the left. We've got a kind of a smoky purple pink background. If we look a little closer at the letters themselves, we've got kind of a 3D effect. We've got kind of glowing type edges. And then we have some white type at the top and the bottom. And that's pretty much it. So those are the things that we want to recreate. And the other thing I want to do is I want to have, by the end of it, a template that I can use and just change out my subject and then have everything else kind of remain the same. So I'm going to want it layered. I want to be able to change the character using smart objects. And I want it to look pretty much like this poster. All right, so let's go ahead and close this and let's go to New File. We're going to start by making a file that's 20,000 or 2025 wide by 3000 tall. We're going to make it 72 dots per inch. And for the color profile, I'm going to use Adobe RGB. And let's hit create. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is set up some guides so that as I'm placing things in here, you also know where to place them. So let's go to View, Guides, New Guide Layout. I'm going to go ahead and reset this to the default. And here for the columns, we're going to set this to 3 with no gutter. I'm going to set the rows to 4 with no gutter. And then I'm going to turn on the margin, and for the top, I'm going to do 560. For the left, I'm going to do 170. Bottom, 330, and right, 268. And basically within these guides right here is where our ballerina is going to go. And then on the right side here is where our character is going to go. All right, next, I'm just going to add a solid color for the background. And before I even do that, I actually want to pull in some swatches. I've already done it here. I'll go ahead and delete these. But if you go to your swatches, and if you don't see it, go up to Windows Swatches, then go to Import Swatches, and inside the assets for the tutorial, you're going to see these ballerina swatches. And if you import those, you're going to see them here. We're going to use these as we're painting and creating this file. So I want to have them open here. And the first thing I want to do is just add a solid color background. This is going to be 1A0044. Let's hit OK. And let's call this background. And to create kind of just our smoky background, I'm just going to hand paint it. So let's call this colored smoke. And we're going to go to our brush tool. I'm going to right mouse click, and I'm going to go down to my Nucly brushes. And if you don't have these, you can import this specific brush from the assets by just going here, import brushes, and then go to the assets folder. You'll find this brush in there. Okay, so with this brush selected, I'm going to set the flow down to, let's say, 20. And now I'm going to select these colors here and start brushing with them. And you can see what that's doing. It's creating this kind of smoky looking background. And I'm just selecting basically these first 5 colors and just kind of painting. I want to create variation in my background. So a little touches of blue here and there, areas that get darker. Probably like a little corners that get darker as well. And then maybe a little bit more of this. Yeah, something like that. I think that's pretty good. Okay, so now we have our kind of basic smoky background. The next thing I want to do is pull in my character. Now, the way I want to do this is I want to set it up as a smart object, meaning I want a copy of this with my character that has all the guides. So to do that, I'm going to go to Image, Duplicate, and we're going to call this Model Smart Object. And then let's go to File, Open, and I'm going to open this Simon01 DNG file. And this is a photo I took of my brother. I've already set the file up how I want it, meaning in terms of the lighting and stuff. So I'm just going to hit Open. And here I want to cut him out from the background, so I can do that with the Remove Background down here. And noticing that it didn't do a great job right there. So let's just go clean that up. I'm going to select the mask, go to my properties, and then I can open Select and Mask. In here, I'm going to go to my Edge Selection tool, just kind of paint in here where that hair is. And let's hit OK. So better, but still not great. If we look at our mask, we can see it's got some issues. I'm just going to go onto a black brush and make sure this is set to overlay. And then with just kind of a soft brush, if I paint this area with black set to overlay, it's going to get rid of the parts that I don't want, but still keep a little bit of that hair texture. So happy with that. Let's go ahead and convert this to a smart object. I'm going to drag it in here and place it. So this is my model smart object. And once I have it placed in here, you'll see what I will do. So in here, I want him basically right about there. So lined up to the bottom and just kind of on the right side of this guide right there. Maybe a tiny bit smaller too. Okay, and then I'm going to throw away these other layers so that we just have our model in here with the guide. So that's what I want. I'm going to go ahead and close this, save it, and I'll save it into the Assets folder. So Model Smart Object. Now in this file, I'm going to do File, Place Embedded, and we're going to grab that Model Smart Object. It should place in here directly because the files are the same size. So let's hit that check mark. And now when I want to change the model, I can double click this. I have my guides in place. I know where I need to place my model. And when I close it, it'll update in this file. So now that I have that set up, what we're going to do is add some effects to this smart object. And as we do this, we want to avoid anything that if we're using a different model is going to have a different effect. Meaning I don't want to add a mask on here that just does something with his eyes, because the eyes are going to be in a different place for a different model. Okay, so let's go down here, and the first thing I want to do is I want to add an inner shadow. And basically what we're going to do here, let's go ahead and reset this to the default. So the way an inner shadow works is it creates a shadow on the inside, right? So it's almost like an inverse mask. Now what we're going to do is we're going to change this into a glow and use that to create that left side edge glow. So to do that, let's go ahead and reset this again. I'm going to change this to screen and then change the color here to just a magenta kind of color. So something like this. We're going to change this to be relatively low on this first one. I'm going to change this to be 156. For the distance, I'm going to set this to 45. And then I'm going to change the size here to 130. And let's adjust this opacity, maybe around 35. So you can see what that's doing. It's adding that kind of glow edge to there. We don't want it too strong because we're going to be adding more and more effects on top of here. Okay, so that's our first one. And I can see that I have multiple copies of effects in here. So I'm just going to reset this to the default list and then turn this back on. Okay, so you'll notice that some of these layer styles have a plus next to them. Those are the ones that you can make copies of. So the reason I use this inner shadow, aside from the fact that I just wanted it on one side, is I can also make a copy of this. So I'm going to make a copy. This one I'm going to set to overlay. And this one's going to be kind of more of a lavender color. So something more around here. And I'm going to set this one to 100, but this one I'm going to set the distance to 164 and then the size to 180. And if I turn this on and off, you can see that that's just kind of putting that kind of purple light across that entire side. Okay, and then the last one, let's go ahead and add one more. This one's going to be more of a light pink. And this one's also going to be a lot smaller. So I'm going to set this one to 13 and then 43. So this is really just along that very edge, kind of giving it that kick there. Okay, so now that we've added this, there is a little problem. And that problem is I don't want it to come in to the bottom here, and I really don't want it so much on this right edge. But if I add a mask to this and start blocking this section off, as you can see, not only is it getting rid of our character, it's also kind of adding more of this effect to where our transparency now is. So let's go ahead and delete this layer mask. What we're going to do instead is we're going to do Command J to make a copy of this. And for this copy, I'm going to call this copy Edge Lighting. And I'm going to take all the effects from this one and throw them away, and then take my fill and put it down to 0. So now this layer, all it's doing is adding that edge lighting. I'm going to add a mask to this and then double click in here, and I want to make sure I turn this on. Layer mask hides effects. So now when I go on to my gradient tool, I want to be on a classic gradient, linear, black to transparent, and I just kind of go on the edge here. All it's doing is getting rid of this, but just on that edge. And because I'm doing this with a mask, no matter which character we put here, basically that right side and the bottom edge will not have this kind of edge glow. So that's it that I want to do on that. And the next thing I want to do now is I want to add some sharpness. So to do that, I'm going to make one more copy of this smart object. I'm going to put it on top here. We're going to call this one sharpness. And for this one, I'm going to go to Filter, Other, High Pass. Let's leave this on 2 and then put this on Linear Light. And if we zoom in here and turn that on and off, you can see it's adding that sharpness. It's way too strong right now. So we're going to take the fill down to about 30. And here you can see the before and the after. It's just having a nice sharpening effect on our character there. Okay, so character is basically done. The last thing I want to do is just add a color gradient over the character. Now, our background already has obviously a strong color, so we don't need to color grade the background. I just want to color grade our subject. So I'm going to go onto our bottom model subject here, and I'm going to make a gradient map. Now, the two colors for the gradient map are in our swatches. So if we select this color first, hit X on our keyboard, and then this color, and then we can hit X on our keyboard again. We want the lavender color on the left or the foreground, and then we want this kind of lighter pink on the background. Then we're going to go here and add a gradient map. You can see our gradient map already has those colors. I'm going to clip this so that the gradient map is only applying to our model. And then I want to change the blending mode here to soft light. And just like that, our subject now has that color grade on top of it. So I'm liking all that. The next thing I want to do now is start adding in our lettering. So let's go ahead and turn our guides back on with Command semicolon. I can take all these layers that make our model and do Command G to put them in a group, and I'm going to call these model. I'm also going to take these two and put them in a group and call this background, just so that I'm keeping my layers nice and clean here. We're going to create a new folder set and we'll call this titling. I'm going to go on to my type tool, hit D on my keyboard to default to my colors. I want my foreground color to be white. And for this, I'm going to be using an Adobe font called Acumen VF, and the VF is for variable. So this is a variable font, and we're actually going to be using one of the variables in it. So first, let's go to Extra Condensed Bold. And for this first one, we're going to be setting this at 72. And I'll just go right here, click, and then type in "from the world of." And let's go ahead and select all with Command A. And I'm going to set this to -10. And then here, under our properties, you'll notice with this variable font, we have weight, width, and slant. And we're going to be using this slant. So let's go in here and I'm going to do -5.25. And you can see that gives it just a little bit of that italic. Now I don't want it full ital, I just want it to have a little bit of a slant there. So let's hit that check mark and then let's zoom in. And I'm going to move this up a little and then hold down Option to make a copy and then drag this down. Let's go back onto our type tool. And then in here, we're going to select this and then type in John Wick. I'm going to select all and then change this here to 192. And probably want to take this into, let's say, -20. Okay, and then let's move this down. I want it about half an M width, meaning kind of, if you think of the size from the bottom of the H to about the middle of the H, that's how much space I want between here. So right about there. I want this to line up with the left here. And then for this "from the world," I want it to line up along the top here, and I want the F and the J to line up. So right about there. Good. All right, then let's take the John Wick, hold down Option. I'm going to drag this to kind of down here, and we're going to change this one to 86. And let's go back onto our type tool. And I've noticed that when you're using variable fonts, using T on your keyboard to go on the type tool doesn't work. It just wants to default back to that move tool. So until Photoshop fixes that bug, at least on Macs, you have to go on the type tool with your keyboard, or sorry, with your mouse. You can't do it with your keyboard. And then we're going to go here, select this, and then change this to 86. We did that already. Let's go ahead and change it to "in theaters." And for the "in theaters," I'm actually going to change this to -10. And then if we hold down Option, we can drag this to the left and then go back onto our type tool, select all, and let's type this June 6. We're going to select all again and then change this to 118. Good, that looks good. And then I'm going to take both of these, "in theaters" and June 16, and just move them up a little bit so that they're about the same distance from this guide as the John Wick is from this guide. So right about there. Okay, so now we're getting to the fun lettering, which is the big ballerina. And we're going to do a little bit of trickery with that one. Let's first just take our John Wick because it already has the right font and the right slant to it. We'll copy that layer, then do Command T and just rotate this like so. And then for this, we're going to make this quite large. So this is going to be 770. And let's leave this at -20 for now. And let's go ahead and go onto our type tool. And I'm going to type in ballerina. And let's go ahead and move this down. We basically want this to fit nicely in these guides right here. So just perfectly centered up. Maybe I think I can change this to -10. Nope, let's try -15. I will really want it to go right to those two guides there. And it looks like -15 is the sweet spot. So right there, perfect. Okay, good. So now we're going to start applying some effects to this. So first, what I want to do is apply a kind of a grunge pattern on top of it to get that effect from the original lettering. So let's go here and we're going to go to pattern overlay. Now I have some Nucly patterns. You probably don't. So if we take these, let's go ahead and delete these. And what we're going to do is go to our patterns, go to this little gear icon, and then go to import patterns. And inside our tutorial assets, you're going to see this pattern samples. These are just 3 of my Nucly patterns. So if you ever want to get really high quality patterns to make lettering with, check that out. Any of these will work. I'm going to go ahead and select this middle one. I want to change the angle here to 80 so that it matches the angle of our lettering. I want to change the opacity to 100, and then the scaling will be at around 50. And that looks good. Next, we're going to turn on, and actually before I do any of this, I'm going to go ahead and reset this to our default list and then go ahead and turn that pattern back on just so that we have our standard list of layer styles here. Okay, next one I want to turn on is this outer glow, and for this we're going to have just a subtle little outer glow here. So maybe even 20 is okay. It's going to be magenta and set to screen. We'll set it to about 13. It's really subtle there. Okay, and then next, we're going to turn on this gradient overlay. And I'm going to reset this to the default. And for the gradient overlay, what we want to do is we want a gradient that goes on the left side here. I want it to be DC00C0. So very strong magenta color there. And then for the other side of the gradient, I want this to be 5B0F58. So kind of a more dark magenta color. I want to set this to overlay, and then let's go ahead and zoom out here. So right now you can see that gradient is going from the top to the bottom. I really want it to go from the left or the right side here down. So we need to change the angle here to 0. And I'm going to reset this alignment. What this does is it basically changes the size of it to be the size of your layer. So that looks good. Next, I'm going to make a copy of this. And in the copy, I want to take the light magenta side and select this top and set the opacity of that to 0. So that this layer is only affecting the bottom, but I want that kind of to drag up further up. So to there, we're going to hit OK. Okay, and then the next thing I want to do here is I want to add just a little bit of an inner shadow. So let's go ahead and turn that on. And you can see the settings here, but let's go ahead and reset to default. I'm going to change this to screen. And here, I want it to be light pink. So let's go to a magenta. And I want the distance to be 0. And I want the size to be about 13. So very subtle. And I want this to be pretty subtle too. So maybe around 15. Okay, and then the last thing I want to do is turn on the emboss. And let's go ahead and reset this to default as well. I want this to be an inner bevel. I want the depth to be as deep as it can be. I want the size to be 8 pixels. And for the global, or for the light here, we're going to use the global light. So it should be 156 and 30. I'm going to change this to linear dodge. And then we're going to leave this on multiply, but we're going to take the opacity down to something really low, like 5. Actually, maybe a little more. Let's say 9. So that's looking good. Let's hit OK. All right, so now the next step is we need to create the 3D effect. So to do that, I'm going to do a little bit of a 2-dimensional trick to create 3-dimensional depth. So to do that, I'm going to hold down Option and make a copy of this ballerina layer, and we can call this ballerina edge. I'm going to turn off all of these except for the pattern overlay and the gradient overlay. So those are the only ones I want turned on. And next, what we're going to do is Command T for transform. I want to make sure this is not turned on because I want to disproportionately scale this on just the height axis. So I'm going to select the height and do 97.5. You can see what that's doing is it's pulling this in so that it looks like it's the edge from this coming at us in 3 dimensions. So now what we're going to do is go into the gradient overlay here. And I want to change this to normal. And then, normal. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go into the gradient itself and start moving these around to create a 3D effect. And let's take a look at just this B down here. And if this were 3D, this would obviously become darker. It would have more light here where these lights are hitting it, and then it would get darker down here. So let's see if we can't create that effect here on our gradient. And already it's starting to have that effect that we want. And that's looking pretty good. Let's hit OK. And that's looking good. So it's pretty janky, meaning it's obviously not real 3D, but for the effect that we're trying to create, it does a good job and it actually looks pretty darn good. Okay, so then the last thing I want to do for this lettering is I want to create that white outline. So to do that, I'm going to go onto my ballerina layer here, hold down Command and just click on the layer to select that transparency. I'm going to make a new layer and we're going to call this letter strokes. And let's go ahead and zoom in here. We're going to go down here to our select contract selection, which is going to make it smaller. We're going to make this smaller by 10 pixels. And then we're going to go to edge stroke. And I want to stroke this 4, and I want to make sure it's center, not inside or outside, and hit OK. And then I want to deselect and then go up to filter, blur, and I want to give this just a 1 pixel Gaussian blur. All right, next I want to go in here and I want to give this a drop shadow, and we're going to use the drop shadow to create a glow. So if we reset this to default, this is what you'll see. We're going to go to screen, set this to a magenta color, set the distance to 0, and then the size to Well, let's start with maybe 5 pixels, add another one, and maybe go up to 10 pixels. And maybe one more. And let's see how these look. Well, I actually really like the way that looks, so I'm pretty happy with that. The only thing is I do kind of want this effect to attenuate, meaning become less just a little bit. So I'm going to add a mask to this, go onto my gradient, and go onto this one, which is a middle gradient. I'm going to set this to 20. And then I'm going to zoom in here and just kind of from the middle going out, I'm holding shift so that it stays straight. I want to just attenuate that just a little bit in the middle there. And that's enough, honestly. It just makes this look a little more three-dimensional, a little more designed. Okay, so now that we have that done, let's take all the layers that make up our ballerina lettering. We're going to call this ballerina. And I actually want this to go underneath the model. That way, if the model does go over the lettering a bit, it's going over the lettering, not behind the lettering. So that looks good there. The last thing I want to do just to kind of wrap this whole thing up is add a layer below the titling but above all of our artwork for film grain. So we're going to call this film grain. And I want to fill this in with a neutral gray. So if we just go here, set this to 50, and then Option Delete to fill, I'm going to go to Camera Raw. It's kind of my favorite tool for creating film grain. If we go to the effects here and just turn on that film grain, the reason I like using this over the noise tool in Photoshop is I have this film grain control here, this roughness control, which I really like. So I'm going to go something like this and then hit OK. And let's set this to linear light. Now, right now it's way too strong, but we can take the fill, not the opacity, the fill down to about 25. That'll give us a really nice film grain effect there that goes over everything, just kind of pulls it all together. Okay, so that finishes our poster, but now, as we were working here, I did mention at the beginning that I wanted this to be based on smart objects. And now that it is based on smart objects, I want to show you how easy it is to put in a different character. So here I'm going to go to my model, and if you're turning this over to someone, you could actually even simplify it further. What you can do is make one more copy of this. So let's do Command J. And with this kind of final copy, I'm going to pull it up to the very top so that it sits over all of our other layers. And we're going to call this Replace Me. And we're going to set the color of this to red and then set the opacity and the fill to 0. That way this layer is having no effect in the file, but being at the top of the layer stack, it's very easy to know which one you need to replace. So I'm going to double click on this to replace it, and then let's go in here to File, Open, and in the Assets folder I've got a photo of my daughter that I took. Let's go ahead and open this, and I'm going to do this really rough. I'm just going to remove the background here. And let's go ahead and pull this into this file. I'm going to do Command T for transform. And let's go ahead and turn our guides back on. And I think we probably want her somewhere around there. Let's turn him off, and then let's go ahead and save this. And voila. So you can see it added that edge glow on her coming from this ballerina sign. It color graded her. So it did a lot of those effects for us. And all we had to do was double click and replace that image. So there you have it. That's how you recreate that poster, and also how you can set up a smart object based poster file that you can then switch out with any other characters or photos that you want. Now, hopefully through this, you learn tips, tricks, and techniques that you can use in your own projects. And if you enjoyed this tutorial, please subscribe to my channel, leave a like, leave a comment. I do read them all. And finally, if you're interested in learning Photoshop and really becoming a master at it, not only just Photoshop, but also the skill of graphic design, of photography, of compositing, and the art behind it, check out Nucly.com. I sell professional training and tools for designers, photographers, and artists. So check that out. Right now, I am offering a free toolkit, which is kind of a preview of what we offer at Nucly. So I'll include a link to that as well. Otherwise, here's some other tutorials that you can check out. And I will see you next time.